Hello there guys and welcome back to another episode of Marvel Contest of Champions character breakdowns. So today we are going to get to talk about Mr. Mary Poppins himself. That's right, we are switching up the order here a bit. So I'm going to be trying to get some characters from the beginning of alphabet, from the end, and then the middle, and then kind of mix it up a bit more, but still make sure that I cover everybody. But either way, so Mary Poppins, Yondu, a character that initially got introduced as fairly ruthless mercenary with some complicated relationship with Star-Lord himself in MCU, later got redeemed in MCU Guardians of the Galaxy version 2, but he never actually got his bio updated in the game. That's why it will lead to quite an interesting small nod to this fact that he got added basically as a result of the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie. But before I get more into that, let's just change the venue. Let's jump to my blank wall, which is going to be very comfortably populated with all sorts of information about Yondu. So let's start from the very beginning. So his name is obviously Yondu. He is of tech class size M, and his only notable tag is mercenary. Other than that, he is not affiliated with Guardians of the Galaxy. He's not in game recognized as a hero and or villain. So basically that kind of like means that all of his character bio information has stayed static to his presence in the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie, even though, as we know, he basically passed away in Guardians of the Galaxy 2 as a part of Guardians of the Galaxy. All of that being said, let's check out his damage output. So his damage output overall is subpar and is one of the reasons why he's actually not more commonly used, because if he would inflict damage output that's kind of expected from the champions these days, his utility and heal block and the bleeds and the fact that he can bleed through blocks, so on and so forth, could actually lend him somewhat comfy position to a kind of like mid-tier champion that is frequently being used. Unfortunately, he just does not hit hard enough to justify bringing him with a limited amount of utility that he has. Now, how does he inflict this damage? Largely, it's via his bleed and or armor break stack-ups if opponents are bleed immune. There's also a really cool interaction where he can remove opponents' armor breaks, which many people I bet did not know about, which initially led people to be confused. So here is small trivia time. When initially people read Yondu's ability description, and in his ability description it is stated that he steals opponents' armor buffs to sell them for units later. So there was a group of players who actually thought that Yondu will be able to steal armors and that will increase your units in-game. That is not how it functions. It's just a cheeky wordplay that I guess got understood too literally. But hey, you never know, right? It would be nice if he would be stealing units but okay. So another thing that he has going on for him is his special 2 damage is increasing as the fight goes onwards for every special attack that opponents use. So in longer fights it will be beneficial to start spamming your level 2s, and that will enable you to basically do more damage for every special attack that the opponent has thrown, up until max of 10, I believe. So there is a cap to that, unfortunately, because and realistically there is no good reason why it should be capped, and if it were not capped, he could actually be somewhat interesting cheese character for some really long fights. But that being said, let's move on. So as an opponent, Yondu does possess some defensive capabilities, and the first and foremost thing is that his light attacks are Yaka arrow hits, which are projectiles which cannot be parried. So Yondu is one of those champions that you need to be very careful when you attempt to parry stun him, and you basically always want to kind of dash back and let him run in at you. You never want to attempt to parry him in close distance, because then that will be Yaka arrow hit that can inflict bleed on yourself through block, and he's obviously not going to get stunned, and it's a bad time overall. So whenever you want to parry Yondu, you need to make sure you dash back some sort of decent amount of distance. Now, level 2 is another issue. He can pose as a threat, because it is fairly hard to wait, and Yondu in general has a lot of block penetration, and even if you block that level 2, it will still do a whole butt ton of damage through your block. So it's never a good idea to push this guy to a level 2 unless you are extremely comfortable evading it, which I, for instance, am not. I can evade it kind of like 50-50, not that I have particularly practiced for it, but for vast majority of the fights I just do everything that I can not to push him to level 2, and that is the same recommendation I would suggest to pretty much everybody else, I suppose. Now also, as mentioned, he has high block penetration on his Yakaro hits, and he can inflict bleeds through block, so be careful. So don't block a lot against him. And obviously if he's stun immune, then you'll have to rely on intercept, so on and so forth. So he is actually quite tricky for kind of intermediate and newer players. Once you get used to fighting him, you realize he's not all that bad. But I remember when he initially got added to the game, he was a popular alliance for defense placement, especially on some bleed enhanced nodes or some strike backs, so on and so forth, because there are some conditions you need to play around, and he in fact can turn out to be a tricky opponent. Now his most notable utilities is effectively the very good access to long heal block. His level 1 has a 10-second heal block, which doubles its duration if opponent is already regenerating. So effectively you can place a heal block of 20 seconds, which is a really long solid heal block, with your level 1 extremely quickly. Additionally, you can get rid of opponent's armor ups just by striking them. I believe you have 25% chance to remove opponent's armor just by landing a hit, so that is also somewhat useful. Other than that, there are small kind of like nods to his abilities. For instance, opponents gain slightly less power for each debuff they have, and so on and so forth. And whenever opponents launch their special attacks, you basically place weakness debuffs on them if your Yondu is awakened for every debuff they have, thus kind of like making him a bit more tanky, I suppose, and making opponents hit weaker. But none of those abilities have any actual impact or meaningful enough impact to be kind of like noteworthy, I suppose. So there are some more things that he can do, but all in all, it's not worth doing, I'd say. Alright, so notable uses. So he is still a popular low-level Alliance War defender, especially because he was one of the first 12 champions introduced in the game as 6 stars. So quite a few people have managed to acquire Yondu as 6 stars, and thus have him at a decent kind of like strength level without having had to invest resources in him. So he's one of those champions that you kind of pull, and then you're like, okay, you can go on defense if you have relatively newer account. Now there are some uses Yondu can have in variant 1 in the tech chapter, because there are several fights where you either want to hit opponent in block. For instance, there's Aggression Fury Modok, that's also stun immune. That's extremely hard fight if you want to fight it normally, and I personally, whenever I try to do that fight on my streams, kind of always resort to using either Yondu or Sentinel or somebody else and just hitting Modok's block all the time. And with that, obviously Yondu has a lot of block penetration. He can bleed opponent through block, so he can inflict more damage through block. Additionally, heal block can be useful, and last but not least, the fact that Yak arrows are not making contact can make him useful for one very specific electro fight on flare node, which is extremely annoying. So Yondu is actually one of the few champions that can solo the fight whilst not being a maxed out 5-star. So that is kind of like useful information. But other than that, he as a champion is relatively solid. He doesn't have anything outstanding to make him overly viable in endgame and Act 6 scenarios. Now, even though I'm sure he could be used somewhere in Act 6, there's just always better options to pick. But if you have happened to acquire Yondu as one of your earlier 5 or 6-star champions, taking him to rank 3 without overcommitting to him with resources, and using him as possible option, for instance, via heal block to deal with some high regen fights, or if you have pulled him as a 6-star, he can still put in work for you. He's definitely far from the worst pull you can get. So for newer progressing accounts, he can still offer some viable uses, but realistically it's not all that there kind of like with the guy. So anyways, talking about his synergies, and in this video I'm not going to jump on my website because there's absolutely nothing really worthwhile in his synergy wise. The only thing that I can and would note is that Captain America Infinity War and Mr. Fantastic have quite potent and very useful tech class synergy, either via ability to place power stings, or either basically draining opponents' remaining power whenever they use special attacks. So Yondu is a tech champion, so he can benefit from that. But realistically, his own synergies are absolutely pathetic, and seemingly no other champions in Marvel Concept Champions really like Yondu, because hardly anybody synergizes with him. I don't even... One second. Let's see if I can find quickly, because I had that page open here a second ago. Who is the only champion only champion that actually synergizes with Yondu is Sentinel, and it offers Yondu no benefit at all whatsoever. So basically no champion in MCOC can offer Yondu anything via Synergy, so it's actually quite sad. Nobody likes this guy. It's kind of like Kabam threw it in the game and then somewhat forgot about him, I guess, because yeah, he has gotten absolutely zero love by Kabam. And yeah, so today is a fairly quick video. Yondu is a relatively simple champion. Let's issue his verdict and then showcase a bit of his gameplay before we finish off. So my verdict for this champion is going to be quite simple. So he is Mr. Mary Poppins himself, as he proudly declared in Guardians of the Galaxy version 2. Realistically, he'll have no significant impact on well-developed rosters. He will always be bench warmer or arena fodder. For less developed accounts, not worth the high resource investment, but can be used for heal block, and majority of people take 5 stars to rank 3, or majority of them to rank 3, and he is quite easily accessible at 6 stars. So yeah, if you do not have to invest a lot of resources in this guy, he can and will find some uses, but all in all, he definitely isn't worth your tier 5 catalysts or tier 2 alphas, so on and so forth. All of that being said, let's quickly jump in the game here. So let's change the scene a bit, and with that, I'm gonna showcase the ability that I don't think too many people are actually kind of aware, and that is the fact that he can steal armor buffs. So effectively he has armor up buff nullify, which is interesting. So let's see how the fight goes. So Ultron should have access to some armor ups. We can see that instead of bleeding, you can armor break opponents, so that also still increase your damage output. Now, this fight I chose due to kind of several reasons. Number one, I wanted to showcase the heal block, and then maybe the level 2 damage if I will have had chance to activate it whilst Ultron is healing. Okay, so I guess I activated my heal block a bit too early, but it's fine. At least we got to steal that armor up, so he's gonna be processing now. I parried him. So sometimes the simplest solutions are the easiest ones, I guess. So we did have the heal block there. As we can see, we're inflicting armor breaks, kind of cool. He gets weakness debuffs whenever he activates special attacks, and now I'm just dropping my level 2, which does somewhat decent damage, if we're being honest. But yeah, that level 2 damage is not enough to redeem his overall mediocre damage output. Like, here we can see that it's 60 hits for the 13k Ultron. It's just not quite good enough. It's just not quite up there in my opinion, which is like the biggest downfall of the champion. In longer fights he can probably catch up to kind of like medium level damage output via his level 2s, but that would also disable you from accessing heal block. And additionally, yeah, it still wouldn't be kind of like over the moon crazy, I guess. So let's try it against Dr. Voodoo. Let's try and get to our level 1 as quickly as possible and see that a long heal block that I was talking about so much. So here we go. We have heal block. Should last quite a while now. As you can see, he gets weakness debuffs for every active debuff already on him, so that kind of lets him synergize on this with Despair, but again, it kind of would be redundant with that heal block mastery, sorry, with that heal block as well, so it's not like the biggest upside here. Can get a decent amount of debuffs where else it could be useful, maybe Distract potentially, but yeah, still, again, this fight is like 44 hits. It's not really what you want to do with a 6-star against uncollected level opponents. So yeah, that unfortunately is kind of like the breaking point over there. Killmonger would be quite an interesting fight, because his Yak arrows do not make contact, so it should not take any reverb damage from that. And I wonder if his reverb would be classed as an armor. Probably not, but it's worth checking it out. So let's go. Oh no, that's not even Killmonger, that's Black Panther Civil War, and that would actually be quite good matchup, because I should have a decent chance to steal his armor ups, thus making him significantly less threatening. But I think he has higher chance to gain an armor up than I have to nullify it, so he still has. Well, we got him to a point with no armor ups, so it is somewhat effective. You can see that, yeah, we can nullify those things. Let's finish him hitting through block, I guess. That would be interesting. Because I want to inflict some bleeds through block. Oh yeah, his heavy attacks have increased ability accuracy, so his heavy attacks have a much higher chance to inflict bleed on an opponent as well. I think it's pretty much guaranteed, so it's another thing that I kind of forgot to note, but I don't think, again, it's too all that important. But yeah, so that is what Yondu is in Marvel Concept Champions. Unfortunately, he will not be the front runner of your account. So let's quickly jump back to the scene where we started off, and that will bring us to the finish of the video. So hopefully you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, and if you even feel somewhat sorry about Yondu, then here's a picture of Baby Groot. Who does not like Baby Groot? Coincidentally, also picture from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Look at his cute finger at kill everyone button. Now that's a bit terrifying. Either way, if you enjoyed today's video and if you like Baby Groot, then hit that like button. If you did not like today's video, well then what the hell are you still doing here? Either way, I am done for today and I will catch you guys soon. See ya!